It finally happened. California's pickup truck ban just got shut down by the EPA. And if you think this is just politics, you're missing the real hit. This was the kind of rule that squeezes new gas trucks, then quietly detonates the used market. Prices spike, inventory dries up, fleets panic buy, regular owners get trapped paying more for less. But here's where it gets worse. When a mandate gets blocked, it usually doesn't disappear. It comes back with new wording and a cleaner headline. So, what exactly did the EPA stop? Who pushed them to act? And what restriction is already being drafted right now? Let's break it down. Federal authority strikes first. The shock arrived without warning. The Environmental Protection Agency canceled California's pickup truck ban outright. No soft language, no partial rollback. A direct federal stop to a mandate that would have reshaped the entire American truck market. For decades, California dictated national automotive rules by sheer force of market size, but in a single morning, that dominance cracked. Washington had finally said no. The agency's announcement made one point unmistakable. California does not have the authority to erase gasoline-powered pickups from the market. The plan had been built on the assumption that California's environmental goals override national standards. The EPA rejected that idea immediately. Regulators made it clear that the Constitution, not regional ambition, sets the boundaries. The ban would have forced millions of workers, contractors, and small businesses into electric trucks that remain expensive, untested under heavy loads, and unsupported by charging infrastructure. Federal regulators argued that such a sweeping rule could not come from one state, especially when it affected interstate commerce. California attempted to impose a nationwide standard through backdoor regulation, and the EPA snapped that thread. Industry leaders expected legal challenges. They did not expect a complete federal shutdown of the rule. The speed, the clarity, and the finality of the decision sent California agencies scrambling for explanation, as truck owners across the country breathed a sigh of relief. This was not a bureaucratic correction. It was a declaration of authority. And the rupture came from a belief California had relied on for years, a belief that simply collapsed once examined. The myth of unlimited state power. For years, many assumed California could regulate anything touching emissions, no matter how indirectly. That myth allowed the state to push rules that quietly shaped national policy. Yet, the EPA's cancellation exposed how fragile that belief really was. Legal scholars had warned that California's regulatory reach grew far beyond constitutional limits, and the pickup ban revealed that excess in undeniable form. California's plan hinged on a simple assumption. Any truck entering the state must comply with its emissions restrictions, regardless of where that truck was registered. On paper, the rule looked straightforward. In practice, it meant a truck from Texas, Nevada, or Ohio would instantly fall under California authority the moment it crossed the border. That is exactly what the Constitution's interstate commerce protections forbid. The EPA dismantled the premise with one argument: no state can impose regulations that functionally govern the rest of the nation. California's strategy attempted to use environmental language to justify nationwide control. When federal regulators reviewed the details, they concluded the ban exceeded state authority at every level. The reality was unavoidable. Environmental goals cannot erase constitutional boundaries. California's mandate collided with the legal structure that keeps the country unified, and the EPA refused to let one state override national standards with unilateral pressure. California had built its regulatory empire on confidence that no one would push back. That confidence evaporated overnight. Yet the collapse of this myth was only the beginning. A bigger flaw emerged, one that crossed into international territory California never had the right to touch. Before we go further, make sure you like and subscribe so you never miss updates like this. Share your thoughts below, because the decisions being made right now affect every driver, every business, and every community. The foreign commerce mistake. How far could California's ban reach? That question exposed the most damaging oversight in the entire rule. The state attempted to enforce compliance not only on trucks from other states, but on vehicles from Mexico and Canada. That single decision transformed a domestic emissions rule into a foreign commerce violation. Foreign trade authority belongs solely to the federal government. It covers border policy, international shipping, cross-country freight, and trade obligations. When California tried to apply its ban to foreign carriers, it stepped directly into federal jurisdiction. International trucks hauling produce, electronics, and manufacturing goods into the United States would have been forced to comply with California standards. Even though their operations depended on multinational agreements, California has no role in shaping. Trade analysts warned that such interference could disrupt import and export routes, raise the cost of goods nationwide, and undermine diplomatic relationships. If one state could impose its environmental rules on foreign freight, nothing would stop others from creating their own conflicting restrictions. That scenario risked fracturing national unity and trade policy. When federal regulators realized the international consequences, the ban became indefensible. The EPA viewed it as a direct threat to constitutional order, economic stability, and international consistency. Once that conclusion formed inside Washington, the outcome was irreversible. California had crossed a boundary it could not legally approach. Once the foreign commerce flaw surfaced, the machinery of Washington accelerated, pulling multiple institutions into a coordinated response. Washington's coordinated counterpunch. The cancellation of California's pickup truck ban did not occur in isolation. It marked the culmination of a larger federal push to reassert national authority over emissions policy. After reviewing the rule, the Environmental Protection Agency signaled constitutional conflicts. The Department of Justice followed with legal challenges targeting California's use of informal agreements to pressure manufacturers into compliance. Congressional leaders joined in, invoking the Congressional Review Act to overturn earlier emissions waivers that had expanded California's influence. The momentum built rapidly. Lawmakers argued that vehicle standards must be consistent across the country, not dictated by any single region. Federal officials stressed that California's mandate risked destabilizing supply chains, increasing consumer costs, and undermining economic growth. For the first time in decades, Washington institutions aligned on the principle that environmental regulation must operate within constitutional boundaries rather than political preference. California's agencies pushed back rhetorically, but the legal ground beneath them had already crumbled. With the EPA's cancellation, federal authority reestablished its position at the center of national policy, ending the long-standing assumption that California would always lead the automotive transition. The legal shockwave rippled through political, economic, and industrial circles instantly. California's ban was gone, and the balance of power had shifted. What came next would hit the workforce, the supply chain, and the national economy harder than anyone expected. When a policy hits the job site, Jake had been a contractor in Northern California for more than 15 years, relying on his gasoline pickup the way a mechanic relies on a wrench. The morning the proposed ban gained traction, he was standing beside his truck, loading lumber for a remodel, when the news crackled through a co-worker's radio. His first reaction was confusion, but that quickly shifted into something heavier. If the rule took hold, he feared he would be forced into an electric replacement he could not afford and could not charge at most of the job sites he worked. His toolbox, air compressor, and generator already pushed his truck's limits, and the thought of depending on a battery that drained faster under heavy loads made his stomach knot. Small businesses echoed the same sentiment. They operate on thin margins, where every unplanned cost threatens survival. An electric pickup might work for urban consumers with predictable commutes, but tradespeople require durability, towing strength, and fast refueling. Long charging delays during a workday would cripple productivity and inflate expenses. The proposed mandate felt less like an environmental plan and more like an economic detonation waiting to happen. Workers who built California's infrastructure suddenly felt targeted rather than supported. Jake's story represented a broader truth. When regulations move faster than practical reality, ordinary people absorb the blow first. The strain on individuals foreshadowed a larger rupture, one that emerged across the nation's freight corridors. The supply chain fractures instantly. The moment a rule touches long-haul freight, the consequences travel farther and faster than any single truck. California's proposal created a pressure point, because fleets operating nationwide depend on predictable standards. A truck that starts in Texas, crosses Arizona, and delivers produce into Los Angeles cannot change compliance settings at a state border. The rule would have required out-of-state operators to meet California-specific inspection demands, effectively forcing national fleets to adjust their equipment to satisfy one state's preferences. That single complication sparked a chain reaction. Carriers warned that they might reroute away from California entirely, reducing the availability of groceries, fuel, and medical supplies. Supply disruptions ripple like dropped stones, and the shockwaves land where consumers rarely expect them. A delayed shipment of building materials in California can mean higher housing prices in Nevada. A slowdown in refrigerated freight entering Los Angeles can affect food distribution in Oregon. The logistics system behaves like a single interconnected organism, not a network of isolated parts. Fleet operators also raised a technical problem. Heavy-duty electric trucks remain limited by charging time, battery weight, and reduced hauling range. Meeting delivery schedules would require more vehicles, more drivers, and more hours, all of which increase costs. The proposed rule ignored these constraints entirely. What began as paperwork evolved into a logistical chokehold with national reach. Even if fleets had attempted compliance, a deeper infrastructure flaw threatened to halt the entire experiment. The grid that cannot absorb a mandate. Energy analysts studying California's electrical grid had already sounded alarms long before the truck mandate emerged. Peak demand during summer heat waves pushed the system to its limits, and rolling blackout warnings had become disturbingly common. Introducing tens of thousands of heavy-duty electric trucks into that ecosystem would require immense charging capacity, each vehicle drawing power equivalent to a small building during rapid charging cycles. Evidence gathered from pilot programs showed that even a modest cluster of commercial chargers placed measurable strain on local transformers. Engineers projected that widespread adoption would require extensive substation upgrades, new transmission lines, and redesigned distribution networks. None of that infrastructure existed at meaningful scale. The state's push toward electrifying both passenger vehicles and freight too quickly created a mismatch between aspiration and grid reality. A breakdown of internal reports revealed another challenge. Heavy trucks charge at night to ensure morning readiness precisely when solar production vanishes and wind output fluctuates. That timing deepens the gap between supply and demand, amplifying blackout risk. Industry experts warned that one regional outage could cascade into broader failures, especially during wildfire season, when lines must be de-energized for safety. These vulnerabilities painted a sobering picture. The mandate was not just ambitious, it bordered on impossible within current grid constraints. While engineers wrestled with these warnings, financial markets reacted with the speed and severity only investors can deliver. Wall Street's sudden panic. When analysts realized the scale of disruption California's rule implied, market confidence shifted almost overnight. Investors pressed automakers for revised cost projections, and early estimates showed billions in potential retooling needs, accelerated research expenses, and unavoidable production delays. Traders dislike uncertainty more than bad news, and the rule injected uncertainty into every corner of the automotive sector. Research divisions at major banks began issuing cautious reports. Some predicted temporary freezes in manufacturing investments until regulatory clarity returned. Others warned that rapid policy swings could undermine long-term innovation by forcing companies into frantic compliance cycles instead of deliberate engineering advancement. Manufacturers attempting to forecast demand faced a tangle of conflicting scenarios, each carrying financial risk. The reaction did not stop at automakers. Freight companies experienced stock volatility when investors realized that increased operating costs would strain profit margins. Battery manufacturers saw brief surges followed by corrections once. Analysts considered the grid challenges that could constrict growth. Even technology firms connected to autonomous freight systems saw their valuations wobble. The market behaved as if someone had shaken the table, holding the entire transportation sector. Confidence faded until federal intervention signaled a shift toward nationwide regulatory stability. Yet the episode left a lingering message. Aggressive mandates can unsettle the financial foundations that support innovation. That instability forced automakers into a strategic crossroads they hoped they would never confront. Automakers rethink the blueprint. Executives across Detroit, Texas, and Tennessee had been preparing for a future shaped by California's aggressive timetable long before the EPA reversal broke the news. Inside quiet boardrooms and behind closed engineering labs, senior leaders had reluctantly mapped out a world where gasoline pickups faded faster than the market demanded. The pressure had been real. California's market size meant manufacturers either complied with its emissions direction or endured the cost of building separate vehicle platforms for different regions. No executive wanted that burden. Revealing internal discussions showed that several automakers had paused long-term combustion engine investments, not because consumers rejected them, but because compliance projections assumed California's rules would eventually dominate national policy. The reversal changed that calculus overnight. It freed companies from a regulatory noose that had tightened around research budgets and production planning. Leaders could finally reassess the timeline for electrification based on realistic market adoption rather than political force. For the first time in years, they could invest in parallel strategies, improving combustion engines, expanding hybrid offerings, and continuing electric development without sacrificing financial stability. Executives were cautious, not celebratory, realizing how vulnerable companies had become to unilateral regulation that put billions in planning at risk. The EPA's intervention restored national consistency, giving firms room to stabilize strategy. Yet the relief carried a warning. Regulatory whiplash had already strained internal systems. Pressure felt most intensely by the engineers tasked with turning ambitious mandates into functioning machines. Inside the engineering meltdown, engineers had lived through a quiet crisis that few outside the industry ever saw. When California accelerated its emissions goals, development teams were forced into a pace that clashed with engineering reality. Battery chemistry had not reached the durability needed for heavy towing. Weight from massive battery packs reduced payloads, making electric pickups impractical for the very customers they were supposed to serve. Every proposed solution created a new problem. Strengthening frames added weight, reducing battery size cut range, increasing charging speed risked thermal instability. Durability testing produced even harsher results. Simulated towing over steep grades drained electric reserves far faster than predicted, and cold weather performance triggered unpredictable voltage drops. Engineers warned that meeting California's timelines would compromise safety margins, but internal deadlines kept shrinking. Teams described the environment as a cycle of forced optimism, followed by technical disappointment. What should have been 10-year development arcs were being condensed into 4-year windows. Parts suppliers struggled to keep pace, software divisions were overwhelmed, and testing facilities ran nearly around the clock to compensate for the shrinking schedule. The reversal did not erase the strain engineers endured while chasing standards that defied physics. With the EPA's decision, teams finally gained time to refine batteries, expand hybrids, and pursue sidelined innovations. That meltdown exposed the limits of regulatory speed. Meanwhile, overseas firms that never embraced California's vision began repositioning, reshaping global competition in ways the state never foresaw. If you want to stay ahead of what happens next, make sure you subscribe. These decisions are reshaping the country in real time, and the next development could arrive without warning. Stay informed, stay prepared, and follow for the updates others overlook. Global rivals reject California's lead. Outside the United States, California's rule never carried the same authority it held at home. Japanese and Korean manufacturers understood California's market power. But they also understood something more important. Their global buyers demanded reliability above ideology. In Tokyo, executives questioned why electric trucks should be rushed into production when their core customers valued longevity and proven technology. In Seoul, planners recognized that California's mandate did not reflect the conditions in rural regions, mountain climates, or nations without stable charging infrastructure. European companies offered their own cautious divergence. While committed to electrification in passenger vehicles, they resisted applying the same pressure to heavy-duty and utility platforms. Industry leaders pointed out that electrifying fleet trucks before grids were prepared would create bottlenecks that paralyzed freight systems. These global manufacturers adopted hybrid-heavy strategies, betting that multi-technology lineups would prove more resilient than California's electric-only vision. Foreign competitors gained unexpected leverage, investing in hydrogen drivetrains, efficient diesel systems, and advanced hybrids, while American firms were confined by California's narrow mandate. After the EPA reversal, those rivals moved quickly to target frustrated U.S. buyers. Their rise aligned with growing worker resistance at home, setting the stage for a powerful pushback from the people assembling the trucks. Today, labor unions draw a line. Labor unions watch the unfolding debate with suspicion, recognizing that rapid electrification threatened thousands of manufacturing jobs. Electric vehicles require fewer mechanical components, reducing the need for machinists, toolmakers, and assembly workers. When California pushed its mandate, union leaders understood that an electric-only future could shrink employment faster than factories could retrain employees. They questioned whether policymakers truly accounted for the people who built the vehicles rather than merely the people who bought them. Union representatives argued that electrification must follow infrastructure readiness. Without reliable charging networks, trucks would fail in real-world conditions, and the backlash from buyers would erode sales. Declining sales would in turn trigger layoffs. The ethical dilemma was unavoidable. Pursue environmental goals at the cost of thousands of livelihoods, or create a transitional path that valued both the planet and the workers. Unions chose the latter and demanded guarantees of job protection, retraining pathways, and manufacturing flexibility. Momentum grew as reports showed factories rushing into electric production faced downtime from parts shortages and unstable supply chains. Workers realized rapid mandates threatened jobs, rallying for a transition grounded in economic and engineering reality. The EPA reversal validated their concerns, proving their fight was existential. Yet these clashes merely foreshadowed a larger transformation forming on the horizon. Clean energy meets reality. For years, the clean energy movement believed that mandates could accelerate progress faster than markets ever would. Environmental groups saw regulation as a vital corrective to decades of pollution, assuming that government pressure could force innovation into existence. That belief shaped countless campaigns, policy proposals, and climate narratives. Yet the EPA reversals, confronting California's pickup truck ban, exposed a deeper truth the movement had long skirted. Technology succeeds when people embrace it, not when they are compelled to adopt it. The decision challenged the idea that environmental leadership must always begin with sweeping restrictions. Activists who had treated mandates as unquestioned tools suddenly found themselves reassessing strategy. They recognized that momentum built on coercion is fragile, especially when infrastructure, affordability, and real-world performance lag behind aspiration. Solar, wind, and hybrid systems flourished not because of force, but because consumers saw value, reliability, and cost-effectiveness. The confrontation with California's approach created an ideological pivot point. Instead of dictating outcomes, advocates began emphasizing innovation that earns public trust. The shift marked evolution, not retreat. Environmental groups recognized that pushing industries too quickly creates backlash, prompting a move toward making clean technology desirable through engineering strength, fair pricing, and real utility. Sustainability began looking like a marketplace shaped by ingenuity. That transformation was only the opening act, as political battle lines formed and states prepared to define their own futures. The coming state-by-state war. Across the country, governors and legislatures absorbed the implications of the EPA's action with sharply different reactions. Some red states viewed the reversal as overdue protection against federal overreach, while blue states interpreted it as an obstacle to ambitious climate goals. That divergence set the stage for a regulatory conflict that would spread far beyond pickup trucks. The future landscape appeared less like a unified national policy and more like a patchwork of competing visions, each driven by local identity and political calculation. Scenario planning from policy analysts showed how fragmented rules could alter the automotive world. One state might pursue rapid electrification with tax incentives, while its neighbor might double down on diversified energy strategies. Interstate corridors could evolve into alternating zones of differing compliance requirements, complicating freight movement and adding legal friction to everyday commerce. Manufacturers would be forced to navigate a labyrinth of expectations, customizing product lines to satisfy a map divided not by geography but by ideology. States adopting flexible vehicle policies could attract factories and research, while rigid mandates pushed investment away. This emerging regulatory patchwork shifted power from one dominant state to a competitive landscape across 50 jurisdictions, shaping jobs and innovation and influencing how global markets judged America's most iconic vehicles in the world. The world reprices the American truck. International investors watched the changing regulatory environment with both caution and fascination. The American pickup truck had long been a symbol of durability, independence, and economic vitality, with demand extending far beyond domestic markets. When California attempted to impose its mandate, global analysts recalculated the long-term value of American truck platforms, predicting higher production costs and reduced competitiveness. The EPA reversal forced another recalibration, this time restoring confidence that the American truck would evolve on a timeline synchronized with consumer demand rather than regulatory force. Trend forecasts shifted accordingly. Regions that had once expected electrified American pickups to dominate exports began acknowledging the likelihood of a multi-technology future where hybrid, combustion, and electric options coexisted. This diversity made American trucks more adaptable to countries with limited infrastructure or extreme climates. The resulting flexibility improved the competitiveness of United States manufacturers in foreign markets that rejected one-size-fits-all energy mandates. Global supply chains reacted as battery producers shifted investments, foreign automakers reconsidered expansion, and currency markets priced in renewed stability for the American automotive sector. With regulation settling, the world saw a return to consumer-driven innovation. Ultimately, drivers themselves, not policymakers, began shaping the nation's transportation path through countless everyday decisions that gradually defined the direction of mobility ahead for future generations. The future of the American driver. Long before policymakers debate climate plans or investors model new economic futures, the American driver decides what actually succeeds. The pickup truck is not merely a tool. It is a cultural artifact woven into rural life, small-town commerce, agricultural identity, and working-class resilience. The EPA reversal amplified a question that had lingered for years. Who determines the nation's automotive direction? The people who build vehicles or the people who buy them? In that friction lies the future of the American road. Drivers want choice, grounded in practicality. Rural communities rely on long-distance reliability. Tradespeople need machines that withstand daily abuse. Families want affordability without sacrificing capability. These needs form the foundation of national cohesion, far more than political mandates do. The regulatory shift away from California-centric control restored the sense that drivers, not bureaucratic ambition, will shape the country's transportation destiny. The long-term consequences remain uncertain. Yet, a balanced market invites innovation to flourish instead of being forced. Companies can explore hydrogen, refine hybrids, and improve combustion, while consumers adopt electric trucks when infrastructure truly supports them. In this moment, the American driver becomes the author of progress. And if this reversal signals a new era, the next battle over America's roads is only beginning. Before you go, drop a comment. Do you think California should be able to shape what the whole country can buy? Or did the EPA make the right call? And if you own a truck, what model are you driving? And would you ever switch if the rules forced it? Hit like if you want more straight-to-the-point breakdowns. And subscribe so you don't miss the next update, because the next rule won't look like a ban, it'll look like paperwork.